Good to be with you again. As we approach the 14th Sunday in ordinary time, we are confronted with a gospel that might pose a lot of questions to people. Not so much the basic gospel that speaks of how a prophet isn't always received in his own area or own country, but it's a few little lines in that gospel that could be troubling to some of us. The Gospel of Mark mentions about his identity, who Jesus is. The people say, where did he get this all from? It's almost as saying, what kind of person is he? Is he something special? And they say, oh no, we know. They say, first of all, they mention he is a carpenter. Okay, that's not anything troubling to most people. And then it says the son of Mary. Now, the Gospel of Mark does not mention Joseph at all. And it's very interesting that except for the Gospels of Mark and John, where they don't mention Joseph, they do mention Joseph in Matthew and Luke, but always in the context in Matthew and Luke in terms of the birth or the early childhood of Jesus. After that, the other Gospels are totally silent about Joseph, the husband of Mary. So we have here in the Gospel of Mark, it's almost as though St. Joseph is totally removed from the scene, and they say, well, he's a carpenter and he's the son of Mary. And then it adds another little line that can be very troubling, especially for us who are of the Catholic Church. And the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon, and are not his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Those lines about brothers and sisters have been problematic ever since the Reformation. Before the Reformation, there were some scholars and theologians that would point to these passages and question certain things about Mary, whether she was really a perpetual virgin. How could she be that if he had other children, he had other brothers and sisters? Now, a long tradition of the church has taken this passage and understood it in a very understandable way. It said, first of all, that by tradition, a long tradition of the church, Joseph was an older man. Now, when you say older man, in those days, you could be approaching 40 and you would be an older man, And he was a widower. And he did have a family, or he did have maybe married children or younger children that are already sort of growing up and out of the house. And he took upon himself as a widower to claim this young lady, Mary, that he knew probably from circumstances, and then the circumstances further that she was with child that caused even him to be a little concerned. He took her under his wing and accepted responsibility in that world. And of course, in that world, sadly, a woman couldn't be just by herself. That was just impossible. She had to have a man who would say, I'm her husband, and I'm taking care of her, and I'm responsible for her, and that baby is my responsibility. So I think it's interesting that passage brings a lot of issues forth that are maybe troublesome, but I think can be understandable, even in the Catholic tradition, where we affirm that Mary is a perpetual virgin, and that outside of her only begotten Son, her only Son, Jesus, these other sisters and brothers, we'd call them cousins or dear cousins. And in some families, a mixed family like this is almost brother and sister, and people don't bother with any kind of distinction at all in terms of it. But another dimension of this is Joseph himself. This is the year of St. Joseph. The beautiful statue behind me on the wall here at St. Barbara's is a beautiful rendition of St. Joseph. St. Joseph was a man who had no words recorded in Scripture, so he didn't speak. There's some activity he did, very wonderful activity. He took Mary into his home. He helped the Holy Family escape the threat of Herod. He helped Mary find Jesus in the temple, but after a while he disappears from the scene. He's not part of it. And yet St. Joseph is someone who has a great message for us. I have to say, to be honest, since the scriptures have so little about him, the Josephs that I know have helped me see better who St. Joseph is. I had a dear uncle, Uncle Joe. He was a wonderful guy. He was actually a great carpenter, and he built a beautiful little blackboard for us for our basement playroom when I was a kid. My father, after whom I'm named, Joseph, was a man of great talent and ability. Now, he was opposite of St. Joseph. He was a talker. He could give you a conversation on politics and union questions and everything else going on in the world. But he was a postal clerk, not a postal carrier. He worked at the desk. He was very well informed. People used to come to his small post office. There were a number of clerks there, and they always wanted to find Joe because he seemed to know exactly what had to be done. He knew how to handle processing money for foreign currency. He knew how to send packages to Europe, where there were a lot of Eastern Europeans, Poles, Ukrainians, Slovaks, that were trying to send. This is in the 50s and 60s. In the 70s, they were still sending a lot of packages to help people out in Europe, and he knew exactly how to do all these things. Actually, he was awarded a certificate of excellence by the President of the United States when he was a postal clerk at the U.S. Post Office. But the greatest thing that touches me about my dad, about the name Joseph, is the care he gave to my mother in her last years of her life while she suffered from cancer. She never left the home. She was in that house. His post office was only 5 minutes away. He'd come back every afternoon at noontime, made sure she had something to eat, she was comfortable, and then go back to his work. He was there quickly if anything were to happen. At home in the evenings, he took care of her. I was in the seminary. I even asked my dad, do you want me to quit the seminary and help take care of Mom? He said, absolutely not. You pursue what your mom wants you to do and I want you to do. My brothers and sisters were too young to actually do too much, so he supervised all her care to the very end. He was a devoted husband, a devoted man to his wife, his spouse, like Joseph was to Mary. And from that, I've taken my own, you might say, acknowledgement that that's how I have to love my spouse, the church. As my dad did to my mother, he gave me a great example as how I'm to live my vocation as a Catholic priest, a celibate priest, in love with the church, his people, and dedicate myself to their work. God bless you.